Hi everyone, Adriaan Groenewald here. Welcome to ThinkLead. Of course, it's a global leadership ecosystem, helping leaders think and lead on a whole new level. That's exactly what we need in today's world, especially with the latest pandemic and many other challenges that will no doubt follow. So what we do is we explore the thinking and the leading of experts and top leaders out there, sort of all over the world. And it's a great blessing. That's what technology can give us today. We've got the CEO of McDonald's SA, Greg Solomon. He's in Johannesburg. I'm sitting here in Mpumalanga, and it's wonderful to have you with us, Greg.
It's fantastic to be here, Adriaan. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm excited to ask you my questions and just to have a nice conversation with you because, no doubt, COVID-19 and the lockdown has its own challenges on us personally, good and bad. And then when you add needing to lead a brand like McDonald's, that is such a wonderful household name, and therefore you have that pressure on your shoulders as well, together with your family and all the challenges there and personally. It's not easy. So maybe let's kick off with how are you holding up during COVID-19, Greg?
Well, I guess we would have had our interview 3 months ago or 2 months ago or 1 month ago. I probably wouldn't have had a smile. This is my smile. Thank goodness we've got drive-through, and thank goodness that we open a little bit. But I tell you what, it is you've given us a great honor in the introduction on the huge brand that we are. But if COVID-19 can bring down a big McDonald's, then can you imagine what it can do for other businesses out there? So it was touch and go for us. We really struggled already from March. When March hit us, April total lockdown was a total disaster, and I was really getting worried. I was almost fearful. And then May was devastating as well. And then thank goodness for June. Look, McDonald's is 305 odd restaurants. 80% of our restaurants are drive-through. We did a lot of work to try prove successfully so to the government that drive-through is a superior form of service when it comes to the pandemic that we're dealing with. We opened up drive-through, and thank goodness we're back to around the 80% of norm. Since then, we've got sit-down restaurants, but it's a long hole to dig ourselves out of. I think now that everybody's open, and I'm sure we'll hear from the president soon as well, in the next couple of days, weeks, months on how the rest of the economy opens. It's not so much about surviving COVID. It's actually for us now about surviving post-COVID. So I've really taken long to answer your question. I'm in a much more comfortable position right now, but still 80% is not 100%. That has a massive effect on our business, but we're chugging along, thank goodness.
Greg, what's interesting I find is that there's almost a different honesty in the air and different authenticity. In other words, we now have leaders openly and honestly saying things are going really bad. It's tough, I'm sure one would still buffer it a little bit in terms of the market and the perception out there. But I also have no fear of telling my large corporates, hey, you want another small business to go under, please pay. There's almost this honesty. We're open about how tough things are because it really is, and everyone is going through a tough time. I'm interested then in how you navigated through this process. So what are some key principles you believe McDonald's you applied as a leader in order to get through that very tough March, April, May period, which, as you say, even a big company, a solid company off the back of 2019, that was a magnificent year for you. And no doubt 2020 was going to be equally fantastic. And then this happens. So what did you do maybe differently to get through this period?
I don't know if it's so much the difference. As leaders, we almost train for an event like this. We don't know that we're training for it. I mean, this is the ultimate leadership challenge, isn't it? And I think maybe not differently, but you reflect on this is game time. We've been trained as leaders to go through crisis like this, and you train every single time to be able to empower your team. But now your team looks up to you and says to you, leader, call it. And you don't have all the solutions, but what you can do is you can fall back onto the basic principles of some leadership things that you should be doing as a good leader all the time. And the first is communications. And I'm a true believer that communications will determine your destiny, not only will it determine your relationships. And as a leader, it is all about relationships. And for me, the first thing that we did is we turned on various different communication forums. This is one. We went to a telephone system as well, especially with that top 100 people. And in the heart of shutdown, in the heart of COVID, I was talking to the top 100 personally, directly in the organization every 3 days. Right now, this evening, I'll be talking to my senior owner operators or franchisees, and we now talk every 2 weeks now. So from a communication standpoint, I had a daily meeting with my exco. I had an every 3-day meeting with the top 100 in the business, talking to them about where my mind is at, but more importantly, listening to them about what's their fears. And then most importantly, being honest. And it was a time where we had to deliver some tough news. People wanted to know what's going to happen to our businesses. Or sometimes I had to say, I don't know. People wanted to say, can you help me, Greg? And sometimes I had to say, I cannot help you. You're sort of on your own on this particular issue. So it's those brutal messages that need to be articulated, but it's visible leadership. And in this case, we can't be touching each other. You in Mpumalanga and I'm in Gauteng. But visible leadership is the face is important. So communication was one thing. The second thing was at the right time, probably not in April, but starting in May, you now need to talk about where were we going? What was our 5-year plan? Did we have a long-term vision? Are we getting back to that vision? We talked about these V curves and these U curves and these L curves. What does a V curve look like for McDonald's? When can we come out of it? When can we start talking about our future? And that gives hope. Because once you've got future, you've got hope, you've got a vision, and you've got something that people can plan towards. Because as I said, we got this big hole from April and from May. And I said on your previous question, we've come out of it. We're running on the treadmill, but we've got all that debt. We've got all those deferments, and we now got to worry about that. But if you know that you're back on the road, so I would imagine the second one would be hope, very much so. And then maybe the third one is reminding yourself and your business and your people around your purpose and around your core. You see, we got to go back to why was McDonald's founded in the first place? What were we delivering? What are 90 or 80 or 70% of our customers coming to McDonald's for? What are those golden assets, if you want to put it that way? So there's no time for fluff. There's no time for frills. It's back down to what we founded ourselves for. And that for us in McDonald's was quality, service, cleanliness, and value. Value. Underlined for us, we're a value brand. The Big Mac, the French fries, the Coke, the strawberry shake. That's what people want from us, and they want that trust and that reliability. So maybe it's communication, maybe it's hope, and maybe it's going back to your core values.
Greg, it's interesting. So what I hear you say, and I've heard other leaders say, is you had to make your plan believable again. Because one of the challenges surely are in business, it's all about accountability. We often don't see enough of that in government. But in business, it's about accountable. You've got numbers, you've got a budget, you've got to be held accountable against those things. But how on earth do you hold people accountable in this environment where the external environment is absolutely the excuse for non-performance? So what I hear you say is one of the things you had to do was just to reevaluate the plan, make it believable again, that this is still the target, this is still what we want to achieve. Am I right when I say that? Otherwise, what do you hold people accountable against or to?
Well, I don't think this is going to work for everybody, but I didn't change the plan. I said the plan's the plan, guys. Now it's how we go. What we can negotiate is how long are we're going to deliver that plan. Our next aspiration is to get to 400 restaurants. So as soon as May came out, I said to the system, we're getting to 400 restaurants. It may not be to get to 400 restaurants in the time frame, but set that vision. And I think as I reflected on this particular one, I think leaders that have a long-term plan, 5 years, 7 years, 6 years, I always used to say, well, we're going to get hit with certain little bombs. We're going to get an economy that flourishes in a bull or a bear time. But if we've got a 5-year vision, we got to go with the swings and the roundabouts. Well, COVID is a massive swing and a massive roundabout, but it's just refocusing on everybody that we've got a bigger purpose, we've got a bigger dream, and that's to get to 400 restaurants. The pace can be negotiated, the time frame can be negotiated, but our vision remains the same. I think for those businesses and leaders that I speak to that maybe didn't have or not looking out 5 years, it's a little bit more difficult. And then I think I wouldn't say we preempted it. What has COVID done is it's taken the digital and the fourth industrial revolution, those two revolutions, and what it's said what was going to happen in the next decade from 2020 to 2030. Now it's going to happen in 2 years' time. That's what it's done. Now, for those business leaders that were planning already for the revolution of the digital world and how that translates into the fourth industrial revolution, as well as we term it in business, for those that hadn't quite thought about it, it's catch-up time on your plans. For those that have already been doing it, all we have to do now is accelerate what we thought we were going to do in 10 years. We have to accelerate it in 2 years. And I think we're in a good place, thank goodness. We've been thinking about that for a long time. We've been transforming our brand. So we've managed to catch those 2 points. We've sort of got the vision. And I'm saying to the team, this is a tough blow, but let's dust ourselves off. Destination 400 is still in our sights. And that's given hope, maybe excitement. I'm not saying it hasn't said to the system, well, you've got 20% less revenue. What does that mean for the business? Well, we certainly have to cut our OPEX accordingly. We certainly have to get the money down to the bottom line, because we can't lend money to grow or get our shareholders to invest if we don't deliver the EBITDA. So yes, absolutely. You're almost changing the wheels as the car's moving.
Mm. Greg, I want to go a few minutes back and say, as leaders, we're prepared for this. But just stretch that, if I may, or challenge it a little bit. I like the analogy of game time. So we've trained so hard for this World Cup. We've trained so hard for the semi-final, this final. And still, I guess, it cannot prepare you fully for a final of a World Cup. I mean, it's a whole new ballgame when you're on the field and you're playing and so on. So let's put that aside in terms of leadership training, being prepared for difficult times. Is this not like a final where you suddenly lose your two locks and your scrum half and your best wing, and you almost have a B team on the field because of so many injuries in the first half, and you couldn't have imagined such a case study. You couldn't have imagined such a scenario for the leader on the field, for the coach, Rossi or whoever. Is it more in that domain, this game that we were prepared for?
Absolutely. This is not, we prepare for this event, and this event comes, boom, and it's a game, 15 on 15 or 11 on 11. No, it's not about that. I guess I was trying to be a little bit more cryptic and a little bit more deep to say, we as leaders practice leadership skills. It's around how you communicate. It's around how you partner. It's around how you empower. It's around, do you have a strategic plan? It's around, do you have contingency plans? These are all leadership attributes of a strong leader. And in a time like COVID, we could have never imagined what we were going to enter into. A leader now needs to pull all those strings. So that's what I mean. We could have never prepared for this. But if you were ever going to be tested as a leader, COVID has tested those leaders. And I've always said, we don't have a leader problem in this country. We have a leadership problem in this country. And hopefully, on the back of COVID, emerges a lot of really good leaders, leaders that have learned very quickly what they would have learned in 10 years, they're going to learn in 1 year. And I truly believe it's all our little microcosm leadership in our little businesses, all doing the right things. And if I can get it right in McDonald's, if you can get it right in your organization, if every other leader can get it right, that's our responsibility. Our responsibility is not bigger than our own organization. Our responsibility is to get our organization right. Great leaders, great communicators, great strategists, great people and talent developers, authentic honest communicators, and then doing the right things, no corruption, doing the right things in our business. If we could all do that and duplicate that, I think we have a winning formula.
Greg, I mean, we can obviously talk about the doomsday scenario in our country and worldwide. There are so many things right now that's on a knife's edge, economically, politically, expectation-wise. We can just unpack that for hours probably. So things can really go wrong from here on forward, and we can, we mustn't sit back, I'm guessing, and say, well, let's plan for the best. Just in the same way that we couldn't have planned for COVID, we need to look at the future in the same way and say, well, what if it's really worse than we think? How can we handle it as an organization or as a business? But what are some of the positives that have come from this, like collaboration? I know you mentioned that it seems like in a lot of industries, even you had to collaborate with even your competitors, or you had to collaborate with different stakeholders in society, or the trust that we now have to have in our people more than ever before, perhaps. What do you think has emerged that we should capitalize on as a society, as businesses?
There's no doubt I've learned a lot to be a much better collaborator, certainly at an industry level. And it's not orchestrating a movement to try to convince a decision maker to make a decision. It's just brilliant minds coming together. And I've been actually quite astounded to look at this, look at how some of my colleagues in the restaurant industry have come together, and I've learned a lot from them, and we're better for it. We wrote an industry manual on how we would open up our industry during COVID. And if there were 5 of us, I only contributed 20%, because the rest of the guys I'm giving as an example contributed equal to me. So from a collaboration standpoint, I think we're better off because we came together. It's almost like playing for Bafana Bafana. When the big game's on, we have to collaborate. But we know that we're going to go back, being the Buccaneers versus Kaizer Chiefs, or being the Bulls versus the Lions at some point in time. And that's where the rivalry is. And I think if we can learn from our sports teams, we can be in that big game when we're playing our local cup. But at some point in time, we have to play for Bafana Bafana or the Springboks. And I think that's what COVID done. The collaboration's been fantastic. I thank my colleagues out there in the industry. And I think we're stronger as a nation. We are even identified down the supply chain where there are massive opportunities which we would have never spoken about. We would have never spoken about, an industry that needs uplifting in this country, like vegetable oil or sunflower oil. We stumbled upon this particular industry that is underpenetrated, and everybody could rally around empowering that, and then getting together, with other organizations and funding and government and land bank and consumer goods council coming together. I think we'll have a much better future. On just one example, I've given many. We can have a look at soya as well. The industry will rally around that as well.
Greg, I'm going to ask you an unfair question. Tell me if it really is unfair. But it just strikes me now, a memory of the past. I do ask the leaders how they think our president is doing from a leadership perspective, and no one can actually judge because no one's been in his shoes. But we all love judging. But you have had associations with Cyril Ramaphosa from a business point of view. He's not involved, obviously, in your business, but you've bumped into him a few times in your life. And how do you think he's done? I mean, have people asked you for your opinion?
It is an unfair question, because I always want to just stick with McDonald's and not go with it. And as I said to you before, I'm going to avoid your question by saying I don't think we've got to lead the problem. I think we've got a leadership problem. And if all of us can point our fingers at ourselves and make a difference in our little world, I don't think we'll have a president problem or an ANC problem or a government problem. We just too much as a nation and as leaders in the organization looking for the solution elsewhere. President Ramaphosa has not been involved in McDonald's for many, many years now, maybe 6 or 7. So he's a very different leader to who I knew. So all I know is that we as leaders can all focus on making a difference in our own little way. Our little differences can come together and be monumental. So I've avoided your question a little bit. I'm a hamburger guy. I'm not a politician, I guess.
But he cannot succeed if Greg and Adriaan just won't do our part. We've got to do our part. we do have a bit of a savior mentality. Save us, President. Save us, Mr. New CEO of a crumbling business. But if all of us just lead from where we stand, there's this concept we mentioned on our app called I lead. I lead from where I stand. So if we all just lead from where we stand, and we all just become more accountable and trustworthy, then things will be different, very different. So no, I think it's a very good side step, and it brings out a very good principle. Thank you for that. But it's also good for you to clarify, that he's not involved at all. We know that. So how do we see the future? It's fine. We've spoken a bit historical, the leadership principles and the business principles that you've had to apply, Greg. When you look at the future, gosh, we can't almost say post-COVID because we know it's going to stay. We don't know if there's going to be second waves. We now see Russia's brought out a vaccine, but who knows the opposition around that. So we really have to see COVID as part of our lives, and then the worst spin-offs after that will also be part of our lives. Well, what's your feeling about leading into the future? How are you handling it? You say you're on 80%. Where's your thinking going?
Look, I mean, people have carved it up in two phases: COVID and post-COVID, and then there's some literature on the COVID, the post-COVID, and then the recovery phase. I'm sort of more there on the three phases. Unfortunately, I don't think we've seen the worst yet. I think COVID came with all its relief. A lot of businesses were able to survive because of either the UIF or some form of relief from their financial institutions and some form of deferments. I think we through that phase now. We can see that the trends are coming down, but let's not be too comfortable about the trends. Our infections are still at the 5,000 per day infection rates, and those are very, very alarming and very, very high. So I think we've come out of that phase, and now we're in the post-COVID, or we're starting the post-COVID phase. And now banks are going to call on their debt. Your suppliers are going to call on their payment terms now. And you're not quite going to get to that. And that I worry about that a lot. And I think these three phases are going to have different time frames for different businesses. Those businesses that can recover quickly, and those businesses that can't recover quickly. I mean, there's certain parts of our industry, like tourism, that are still not open. You really, really got to put your hand on your heart to those industries and say, wow, how have they survived? I certainly don't think we would have survived, if it was that way. So I'm seeing 12 to 24 months before you're going to get to the Q4 2019 numbers. But then I do see quite a big positive. I really, really do. I think there's a lot of things we've learned during COVID. I think there's a lot of, I want to use this sort of loosely, a lot of fat on the bones where, businesses have shred them in inefficiencies and doing things differently in an organization that's just going to make us more efficient. I'm not necessarily saying that's going to cause job losses. Thank goodness now it's 16,000 employees. We've been able to use very sort of innovative and clever ways to be able to not lose any of our people at this point in time. And we'll try to keep that to a minimum because I'm trying to get that volume back up to normal. And I think for our brand, we've been thinking about these two revolutions, as I've said, for a long time. And I think we're probably going to get back to normal in about 12 months' time. But I fear for many other businesses, it might take 24 to 36 months. I do think to the back half of 2021, we're going to get back to some sort of decent, sort of strong markets. 2022 will be a good year for us. We'll come out stronger. I really feel they will come out stronger. We've got a lot of reflections to do, but I think COVID's taught us a lot of lessons to be better leaders, to be better business people, to understand and respond to the world changes. I do believe that if the world environment is changing quicker than your internal environment, you become obsolete as a business. This has just accelerated. The obsolete businesses versus the businesses that have innovated, changed, and moved on. So to answer your question, 12 to 24 months of pain, and then thereafter, I think we're going to start to see some strength again.
Greg, you're kind of seen as a big brand, but you also consist of a lot of small businesses, small, medium. I don't know what size you categorize a smaller McDonald's in, but the knock on small business is, I'm sure, bigger than on big businesses. What's your feeling on that? And we always say we're going to create jobs for small businesses. I think we were more talk than action in the past, but more so now. Small businesses, I don't even think we can calculate how many of them have folded and are destroyed through this.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm saying that you need both. We have franchisees in our business, and thank goodness, once again, we've built a portfolio of businessmen and businesswomen that are so strong, that are so solid. I always say that there's not one CEO in McDonald's. There's multiple CEOs in McDonald's, and they've had to lean on me in some cases, and I've got to be honest, sometimes I've had to lean on them. And you've got to check your partnerships. It's not so much about a different partner every single year, the one that can offer you the best price. For us, we signed 20-year franchise agreements with our franchisees. Some of our service providers, our beef and logistics service providers, have been with us for 25 years. It's more important than price, much more important than price. So we have a concept in McDonald's. I'd even say a leadership concept called the three-legged stool. 3 legs, 1 leg falls down, the stool falls down. The golden arches sits, or the customer sits on top of that stool. Our suppliers, our franchisees, and the corporation. Now this is not about making everybody happy. This is about making everybody equally happy. Now there's a big difference between making your strategic partnerships happy versus equally happy. With equally happy comes with brutal conversation, comes with a lot of compromise, a lot of negotiations, and a lot of trying to find that balance between those 3 legs. How can I pay my suppliers? Who scratches whose back at what particular point in time? But strategic partnerships have reminded me, COVID has reminded me, that strategic partnerships are absolutely essential. That's not saying that we're not continuing to transform our supply chain. We'll continue to do that and transform it through both diversity and also being responsible. But partnerships go much more than price in certain areas. But to answer your question again, more frankly, there's been a lot of talk about small businesses. Perhaps you'll disagree with me profusely on this particular one. But if the big business falls, then there is no small business. So we've got to be careful over here. There's been a lot of talk about small business help, but it's those businesses between 100 million and beyond that have had zero help at all. We've had to help ourselves. So this is that fine balance. We need a good, robust small business industry, and it should dominate our economy. But we got to understand that those big businesses play a big role. And if mothership falls down, it pulls down a lot of small businesses with it. So for me, it's been a balance between the success of both large and small.
A very good point, Greg. Very good point. So I'm wondering, as we sort of start wrapping up 5-10 minutes, what the mentality leaders should have now. So you've been an expansive business and you want to expand further. Okay, so last year you could tell us how many restaurants you opened last year, how many you wanted to open this year. You want to invest in your business. You want it to grow. Ramaphosa went out before COVID last year, whenever he's drived to entice large corporates to invest their money here, to not go offshore and that sort of thing. But surely the mentality of leaders will now be impacted. Surely leaders will now go cautious when we actually need them to be more bold, perhaps, or should they be cautious? Now, how do you as a leader navigate that thinking? And that being cautious is going to obviously not be good for the economy, for larger projects that create more jobs, and I can go on and on. What's your feeling there?
Well, I must admit, it's a good question. I nearly died on my own sword because for many years I've been saying to the other leaders, if we want to grow this world and this country and this economy, stop sitting on cash. Invest it. Stop waiting for somebody to come down and say to you, the economy is going to be okay. South African big business has been sitting on cash for a long time. Let's inject it. Let's have faith and let's grow this country together. And I've hopefully convinced my shareholders and my board to do that. And we've invested aggressively into this country. And then COVID hit us. And so many other big leaders might be sitting out there licking their lips to say, well, you see, maybe you should have been a bit more cautious. Maybe you should have kept a bit more cash in the bank, maybe, but who would have known? And I remember having a staff meeting probably 2-3 weeks after COVID, explaining to my people here at the head office over here that we're going to all have to take salary sacrifice and salary cuts in order for us not to lose jobs. And some of my people said, but how did we get here? How did the mighty McDonald's get here? That 3 weeks after COVID's announced, you're already cutting salaries and you're attempting not to cut jobs. And I'm saying, well, it comes with that brave leadership. I guess I said, let's invest, let's grow, so we're spending millions and millions and billions of CapEx every single year to grow our brand. And the timing wasn't great for us. But hopefully that growth next year will create another 1,000 jobs, and that other 1,000 jobs will be able to make me become more effective, more productive, and create more revenue.
So are you still a proponent of being brave, do you think? Or has that changed your lookout, your outlook rather? What are you still going to try and be brave?
No, we're still going to be brave, and we're still going to lead. We may have learned a little bit of what we have to do during COVID, and strategically grow differently. But as I said in the beginning of the interview, we're not changing our view. We're going for what we believe. We've made this big investment in this country, and we see a future. 1 decade from now, 2 decades from now, our brand needs to prosper, and that's the journey that we're embarking on. So yes, if you had to say to me, go back, knowing that COVID was going to hit, would you do anything differently? I'd probably say no. Take the risk.
Yeah, that's Greg. This sort of second last question: how do you think you could prepare your leaders differently, those up and coming leaders, for such crises in the future? Is there anything else that you think you should do, your organization should or could do? Because if you go to business schools, they could never concoct such a case study in their lives, wildest imaginations. But now I would think they would sit back and say, okay, let's think of the worst, business case scenarios. What can we do more to prepare our leaders for that worst final?
I was in a mall yesterday, and the alarm went off, and it said, fire, 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 please move to the door. And I thought, wow. I ran to the guard, and I said to the guard, what's going on? Is there a fire? He said, no, it's only a drill. It's only a drill. And I guess, which is cool, got everybody thinking about it and got everybody prepared for the drill. So how many fire drills do we have in our business? I'm big on contingency plans, So going back and thinking about it differently, often is the case. I'd pick up a call to the supply chain guys and I'll say, stop beef production now. I'll almost mimic that the beef plant shuts down. Now the team must quickly react. Where are we going to get our beef from? Are we going to fly it in from Australia? Are we going to get it in from Namibia? Where's that beef going to come in? And it literally has to come in within 24 hours. So I think as business, we've got to continue with our lives. But we got to have those contingency plans in place. As leaders, we've got to understand what risk mitigation is. Internal audit is absolutely crucial, and it's not just about finance. It's about understanding brand risk, people risk, operational risks, and really having those contingency plans and triggering those contingency plans. Because what makes you powerful as a leader, what makes you nimble as a leader, as a chess player, if you play chess, you'll sort of understand it's not about that move. It's about predicting what your opponent's going to move and what are your 3 moves in the back. If he moves, move 1, what are you going to do? And that makes you nimble as a leader. So what would I do differently? As robust as our contingency plans are, I'm going to make sure that they're even more solid, from that perspective. So if times like this hit, I can go back to those contingency plans and at least hold us. Will I have a contingency plan that holds us for the next crisis in our lives that's going to say we're going to have to lock ourselves at home for 24 months? No, I don't think you can ever plan for that.
But one can imagine more pandemics, for example, and maybe as a country we know a little bit more about how to deal with it. And Greg, let's just quickly turn personal. What has this done for you as a human being, as a father, as a husband, as a leader, as a citizen, as a human being?
Yeah, well, look, I'll start first as a husband. I've just loved the fact that I've just been locked at my home. My relationship with my kids, they're older now, and my wife, the four of us, plus the few people that work in the house, we all brought us together, all 8 of us in the house. And it was just a real special time. And I reflected deeply, have I been a success as a husband and as a father? What could have I done differently? We shouldn't have any regrets. But certainly I teach my son that maybe I could have been a bit more there for him. Do you know what I'm saying? Or my daughter. I wouldn't say regrets, but it's taught me how precious my family is and how close we are and how special it is. My son's flown back to Cape Town now because he's at UCT. So we miss him dearly. So that's taught me the value of your family. Starts with your family first, then your community, then your country, then your world. So that's been a huge lesson for me. As a leader, it's taught me humility. It's taught me that I'm not going to have all the answers. It's taught me, thank goodness, that we've built brilliant talent in this business that's helped me navigate through this. It's taught me about comms, communication, and partnerships, very much so. And then as an individual, it's maybe taught me about what's important in life and what's not important in life. The fancy car, nah. The fancy house, nah. The special holiday in some exotic place, nah. Those aren't the important things in life. I think the important things in life are deeper than that. And I will never be the same man because of COVID. Our lives will never be the same, ever again. This has fundamentally changed who we are. And hopefully I'm a little deeper, I'm a little bit more spiritual, and I'm a little bit more focused on what's the most important things to me, to my family, to my business, and to my world.
Thank you, Greg. That's fantastic. Just end off with the next 6 to 9 months. What would you suggest? And I know you don't know fully, none of us do, but what would you suggest leaders focus on? And maybe it goes back to what you learned in the first few months. But if we had 100 CEOs of businesses listening right now, what would you say to them?
Well, I think the first thing you've got to do is, if you've got a broken car, fix what you can fix. There's going to be a bit of shedding. Get the shedding done. If you can't get the shedding done, then come up with creative and alternative ways to at least get the car back on the road. Once you've built momentum, then you can build revenue. And once you're building revenue, you can solve future problems. You're not going to be able to look out too far. You can have big dreams, but small steps. And every single step you cultivate your dream. Go back to your principles, go back to your values, go back to your core, go back to, the people that are necessary, your teams and people that can deliver for you every single time. And then listen to your customer. Listen to your customer. Now, that customer's changing every single day. But listen to your customer, and sometimes you have to innovate by listening to your customer's needs, and sometimes you just need to be maverick. So it's that combination of those items. Your customer, your core, your values, your principles. Those are ironically more important than the product at this present point in time.
Greg Solomon, CEO of McDonald's SA, thank you so much for your time. You're a busy man, and it's been special. I look forward to sharing this with the world, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, folks, for joining us. That's ThinkLead, helping you think and lead on a whole new level. And that was the CEO of McDonald's, Greg Solomon. Wonderful to have him with us. And all the best in the next few months as you follow some of this advice and the other advice that leaders give us on this platform. Cheers. Bye.